Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to winter and the February 21st Post Falls City Council meeting. I think the weather may have something to do with it, but I was just noticing that we only have staff here tonight. So, Shannon, please note that all council members are present. And tonight, we don't have any ceremonies, announcements, appointments, or presentations. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
There are none tonight, sir.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes from the February 7th, 2023 City Council meeting. Item B is payables January 31st through February 13th, 2023. Item C is Morris Annexation Development Agreement and Grant of Easement. Item D is December Cash and Investments. Item E is Joseph Family Trust Annexation Development Agreement, Right-of-Way and Easement. Item F is Water Department Well 8 Backup Generator Repair. Item G is New Opioid Settlements. Item H is Stones Throw Subdivision Plat Application, and that is it.
Are there any questions on the consent calendar?
I would move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next up is public hearings. Tonight we do have three. And the first public hearing tonight is the DBAT Facilities Zone Change. With that, I'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Jacobson, Council President Thorson, and council members. Once this shows up, I am Ethan, one of the planners here in the planning department to present the DBAT facility zone change. I wonder if we give this a second since it's waiting for a connection.
You might need Greg to leave the room. He seems to have like a negative effect on computers.
The applicant tonight is Fusion Architecture, and the owners of this property that we're going to be discussing is SLCK Commercial Properties, and they're requesting approval from City Council to change the zoning from industrial to industrial from heavy industrial on approximately 2.13 acres. So here you can see the property. It's hatched in red. It is south of Celtice Way and east of Commerce Loop there. That you can see. Currently it's vacant, and the only natural feature that physical characteristic on the site is that it's above the Ratcher and Prairie aquifer, and the water and wastewater would both be provided in this area by the city of Post Falls. Looking at the zoning, we can see that the dark gray is the heavy industrial, which is a legacy zoning. It's an old zoning that we no longer allow, and since codes change, we no longer have heavy industrial zoning standards, so anything moving forward would be presented to you like we are tonight, needing to change the zone from heavy industrial to what the request would be. And so the lighter gray is the industrial zoning, so the hatched black area is the property in question that they are wanting to do from heavy industrial to industrial. So you can see that there is residential south there, the yellow, and that white strip just north of the residential is actually the railroad right away. Looking at the review criteria for a zone change, the first one would be amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. The future land use map designates this site as commercial within the Maplewood focus area. So looking at the future land use map, you can see that the red and that hatched black area, which is the subject site, is is in the red area for commercial. The pink is limited commercial or business commercial, and then the gray is industrial, and the yellow on the south is residential, low density, and then the blue is transitional. So looking at the commercial future land use designation, this category includes a broad mix of commercial, retail, professional, office, civic, and cultural uses. We look at some potential residential uses for those, multi-story buildings, mixture of uses are encouraged, and then they follow the design standards that enhance the character of these areas. These implementing zonings for this area are the CCM, the LC, CCS, SC4, SC5, and then per the focus area. So we look at the focus area a little more, which is the Maplewood focus area, as I mentioned before, which does promote infill development there. You can see I highlighted it. And it does focus on commercial and industrial uses along Celtice Way. So with that being said, they are asking for industrial zoning, which does comply with that focus area being along Celtice Way and that Commerce Loop area. Looking at the next review criteria, we look at amendments to the zoning map. They should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the Post Falls Comprehensive Plan. Goal number 1 is to grow and sustain a balanced, resilient economy for Post Falls, providing community prosperity and fiscal health. The little excerpt below that is what's found in the comprehensive plan. It's a discussion for each of those goals, kind of expands a little bit more on it. So for this goal 1, the discussion would be in seeking long-term prosperity. Residents understand the need to build economic diversity, capitalize on access to neighboring job centers, as well as developing strong business base within city limits. This plan supports strategies that build and sustain a diverse, balanced economic base, retaining existing quality of life assets and help keep the Post Falls prosperous. So each goal has these little excerpts on it. I'm not going to go through each one, but I do want to point it out as they are there to follow as well. So other goals for this proposal, we look at goal 7, plan for and establish types of quantities of land uses in Post Falls, supporting community needs and the city's long-term sustainability. We also look at goal 14, which is involve the community in Post Falls and all local government, planning and decision-making, which is what we're doing currently. Then we go from goals to policies, and then policy 1 delineates support land use patterns that maintain and enhance community levels of service, foster long-term fiscal health of the community, maintain and enhance resident quality of life, promote compatible, well-designed development, and implement goals and policies in the comprehensive plan, related master plan, and/or facility plans, which is what we're doing also. Looking at policy 2, apply or revise zoning designations with careful consideration of factors, including future land use mapping, compatibility with surrounding land uses, infrastructure and service plans, existing and future traffic patterns, and then goals and policies, once again, found within the comprehensive plan, and then master plans and facility plans. A lot of this is a little more detailed than your staff report that you can go to and kind of look at. But we continue on to policy 8, which is encourage compatible infill development. Since this is vacant, being developed, it would be an infill development project for this underutilized property. And then policy 11, prioritize the location of new industrial development in areas that provide close proximity to major transportation facilities, which would be Celtice Way, siting near existing industrial uses where possible, which this area is kind of an industrial area already zoned as industrial. And then cost-effective access to utilities and services, which are provided and readily available. And then the ability to minimize trucking through residential areas. This one, obviously, it's south of the site, across the railroad, so they wouldn't be trucking to this facility, wouldn't be going through that residential neighborhood. They'd have to go further around the railroad to that crossing to the west. Policy 12, ensure new industrial uses near residential areas do not create noise, odor, air, or visual pollution beyond that normally associated with residential uses. Kind of like what I talked about just before, they aren't going to be impacted by that, as there is that right-of-way already there in multiple sites already buffering that residential use from this site. Looking at the next review criteria, we look at zoning being assigned and following consideration of such items, looking at streets classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features. As I mentioned, it's above the Rathdrum Prairie aquifer. We also see that Commerce Loop is classified as a local commercial roadway. Celtice Way is classified as a principal arterial roadway, and future traffic patterns to and from the site are benefited from the proximity to the Celtice Way. That would distribute traffic from the subject site to State Highway 41, I-90, and Coeur d'Alene as identified in the city's transportation master plan. This mobility and access chart kind of shows you that the higher speed, you get less access. So with Commerce Loop coming through adjacent to the site and then leading to Celtice Way, we'd get higher speeds on Celtice Way, which is that principal arterial, and then you would have that Commerce Loop supporting that industrial as that is a way to facilitate that trucking movement to get onto a higher roadway, higher speed roadway. Looking at the review criteria D, we look at the commercial and high density residential zoning, which was not requested or applied for, so that is not applicable for this. And then limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential, which also is not what is requested, so therefore not applicable. And we look at industrial zoning, which is the request, which is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning. As I kind of stipulated, both Southeast Way and Commerce Loop provide sufficient access from the city's master transportation plan, and they can support this zoning. Of the agencies that were notified here on this list, of these agencies, we received back Department of Environmental Quality with general comments related to the time of construction, and then Post Falls Highway District had no comment. That being said, I will stand for any questions you have.
Ethan, clarification.
Yes,
So future land use map shows this as commercial.
correct. It designates the use as commercial for future use.
So, and we're talking industrial. It's industrial, heavy industrial now going down to regular industrial.
Correct.
Is that,
Within the industrial zoning, we have a lot of commercial zoning within
Okay.
our land use table that is permitted. And so you will still get, if, you can still get commercial uses within the industrial zoning because it is permitted, but they will just be limited to a
Okay.
degree because industrial does allow some of
good, I
those.
appreciate it. I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure because we talked industrial and then a lot of the stuff said commercial, so I just wanted to tie the two together. Any other questions of Ethan? Thank you.
Yep.
I don't believe the applicant.
We have the applicant on Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom, okay. And who's on Zoom? What's his name?
His name is Rex.
Rex, are you with us?
I am. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for entertaining our zoning request. And I think I'll keep it really brief. I think that Ethan.
Rex, give us your name for the record, please.
Oh, excuse me, Rex Anderson,
Thank you.
Fusion Architecture.
Thank you.
Like I said, I think Ethan did a great job of explaining the rationale with our project. And I think simply put, this proposed zone change request just falls in line with the goals and policies for the city of Post Falls and as well as the surrounding area. So I will keep it at that.
Good, thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Rex, do you care to rebut nothing that was said? Just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Thank you. I'll decline.
Thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act? Or comment?
Pull up the criteria.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we need to go through the steps?
We do need to go through
And
the
there's four of them
criteria.
now, or?
So we don't, not yet. So as we pull this up, I'll answer that. So we've adopted the new zoning review criteria. When people's applications are submitted, they're locked into the
Okay.
criteria that were in place when they submitted. They have they're grandfathered at that point. And so as we get through the batch that came in prior to that change, we'll stay with the old criteria. As soon as we start seeing applications that came in after the change, we'll switch to the new criteria. So, the first one is amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive plan's future land use map. Thoughts?
It is.
I think we just addressed it. Thank you.
I think your question kind of hit it. So the comprehensive plan calls out commercial, but the focus map said, or the comprehensive plan refers to the focus area that said focus commercial and industrial along Southeast.
Thank you.
I think that's what your comment was. Number 2, amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and policies found in the comp plan. What policies and goals did you see in the staff report or in Ethan's presentation that would support or cut against approval of this application?
Well, economic sustainability and prosperity certainly fits. Industrial tends to produce the higher paying jobs as opposed to service jobs. So that certainly fits with that goal. In terms of the surrounding uses, I mean, everything on Commerce Loop is basically industrial, so fits right in there.
Anyone else?
Okay. Industrial tends not to produce a whole lot of traffic, so it's gonna have minimal impact on the road system. Probably answering some future questions already too, but.
Okay.
All right, the next criteria, zoning is assigned following consideration of such items as street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic or natural features.
Ditto what I just said.
Yep.
Okay, I think that I can work with that one. 4 is not applicable.
5 is not applicable, and then 6, industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes situated away from residential. So what do we have in the record?
Southeast Way and Commerce Loop, and
Separated by the
fits
railroad.
right into the industrial area.
Good buffer. Yeah, not only is a railroad track a buffer that'll keep traffic from going through the neighborhood, but there's no reason for traffic to be south of Celtice anyway coming into this, so it's gonna have minimal
All
impact
right.
on the neighborhood.
Okay.
And that's that. So
Good.
with that, the motion would be to either approve or deny and direct staff to prepare a reasoned decision or bring it back for your approval.
I'll move to approve the DBAT facility zone change file number ZC-22-6 and to direct staff to bring back an ordinance for our approval.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item up tonight is the Title 18A Idaho Street Housekeeping File. That'll open the public hearing.
Hopefully you aren't getting tired of me yet. So, Ethan Porter, once again, here to present the Title 18A Housekeeping Amendment. This one in 2020 went forward to Planning, Zoning, City Council, got approved, but COVID happened and somehow did not get recorded. So, with the changes of City Council, we are looking at just presenting it again. We went through Planning and Zoning, now we're here at City Council to present this to you again for approval. So, with that being said, the applicant is the Post Falls Planning Division. We're requesting review and approval of the requested amendments to the Title 18A, which is Smart Code. Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval at the January 10th, 2023 public hearing. So 18A 20.70, which is building configuration, is specific to the zones SC5 and SC6. SC6, we do not have any zones in the city for that, and we have limited SC5, which is primarily in the downtown area here. And so what we're looking at is subsection 7, the ground floor of any structure constructed on a lot with frontage on Idaho or Spokane streets must be used for non-residential uses. So currently, we just have it as Spokane Street, and we are increasing it to Idaho and Spokane streets. So you can see right here that the darker purple is the SC5, and we can see right along Spokane Street, it's kind of blocked out in the black highlighted here. So along this Spokane Street section here and a little bit of Idaho near 4th right here will also, those are the applicable areas for this text amendment. So we would allow a ground floor use to be non-residential along these sections of street. And so when development for the millwork site was coming forward, they knew this in 2020 went through and got approved but never recorded, so they reached out to us and said, where is it in code? Here's where we are now, trying to get it in code. So that's kind of how it all came about. And looking at this section, kind of what it does, what it helps with is the city center plan, moving buildings closer to the street as you have that ground floor kind of commercial or office. There's a little more interaction within the street frontage. You'd place parking in the rear, and you'd create walkable corridor, having some having some of that window shopping that people can do along as they have a walkable corridor, and they can see, you know, mercantile and stuff like that that maybe they want to go and check out. And also promotes mixes of uses as well for the buildings and structures to get a little more diversity as well for uses. This was the agencies that it was notified to and for comment, and anything that we received back was from Post Falls Highway District, which they did not have any comments. So with that, I will stand for
Any
questions.
questions of Ethan at this point? Gary?
And so this just
Housekeeping.
is regarding the ground floor,
Correct, yes, that ground floor will just be a
so you can still have
non-residential
residential on a second
use. Correct.
floor.
Yep, but it just
An upper
creates
floor.
that mixed-use building, so then you have, you know, kind of more commercial potentially on the first floor, and people can walk by, and people can actually go and visit those amenities, but also people living up or working, depending if it's office or some type of other residential use, so.
And that's currently
Currently,
in
yeah,
existence on
that's-
Spokane Street. We're just
This
adding
is
the Idaho
already
Street
in
portion.
play on Spokane Street, we're just adding Idaho Street
Okay.
to it, so.
Any other questions of Ethan at this point? That would be the staff report and the proponent. Is there anybody wishing to testify?
We have none.
With that, I will close the public hearing. comment? Council, how would you like to move on this one?
I supported it before and I support it again.
Is that a motion?
Making sure nobody else says it. I would move to approve the Title 18A Idaho Street Housekeeping File Number TA-22-6.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye. Motion passes, thank you. And the final public hearing tonight is in the Impact Fee 2023 update. Open public hearing, Mr. Wilson.
Tonight I'm playing the role of John Manley.
And he got appointed that at 8:05 this morning, so
8:05? Well, I'm
Yeah.
surprised Ethan didn't have you make the first two presentations then.
Yeah. So, we had a workshop on this a couple weeks ago, so this is something that I think you've all seen and had a chance to think about a little bit. Make sure this is up high enough. But we wanted to run through, again, sort of the staff memo, each of the staff. We have a staff representative here from each of the affected departments who can talk about the impact fees for their particular discipline. I'm really here to answer any questions you might have generically about what impact fees are, what do you have to do to adopt them, what can you use the fees for, what are the categories, that type of thing. I'll run quickly through John's slides, but because they're John's slides, I am going to do this relatively quickly. You've seen these all once before anyway, so I'll go through it, and then if you have any questions as we go, feel free to stop me, and we'll try to get through this as quickly as we can. So by and large, impact fees are there as a fee or a mechanism to allow local entities, typically cities and counties, through agreement, you can have other entities as well, but typically you have to have ordinance authority in order to implement impact fees. It allows you to establish a fee to essentially require that growth pay for the impact that they're going to have on certain classifications of public improvements. Those are public safety, streets, transportation, parks. Those are the main ones that we're looking at in the city. So you can't use those to pay for maintenance. You can't use them to pay for staffing. It's typically really capital, big-ticket items that have a life expectancy of more than 10 years. We typically do not see those paying for vehicles. One weird oddity in the statute is you can use it to pay for fire engines. That's different than most, but that's the one that stands out. So the idea here is really to shift the cost, to keep the cost from shifting from growth to the taxpayers and have the growth pay for itself. As some of you recall, we recently adopted updated impact fees a couple years ago, year and a half ago. And that process took a little bit longer because of the whole thing called COVID. It took us a little longer to get through the adoption. And so the numbers that we put together to base those fees on were a little bit long in the tooth. They were a little, I'd call it a year old at that point, which just happened to coincide with a rapid increase with the cost of construction and property that we've seen in the area. And so we were directed to go back and immediately look at those costs again, because we knew that we had missed a big run up in the costs and those fees. So that's what we're here tonight, is to address a study that we did to essentially just adjust the cost factors. We didn't change the projects necessarily. We just said, with the same projects in mind, what does it cost us today to build those things, or to buy the property to build those things, versus what it cost 3 years ago. And so that's kind of the numbers that we're looking at. So to adopt impact fees, they have to be based on some planning and what the capital improvement plan. So you have to look out and say, what does our population look like today? What is the population going to be over our planning horizon? How many additional intersections, fire stations, police stations, parks are we going to need to service that increment of new growth? What does that cost? Then you assign a cost to each of those things, and then you break that cost out to each new type of growth that you're getting, so that you're collecting the appropriate amount of fee, but not taking too much, because then you're exacting something and that becomes a taking. And so you can't go too far. One thing that you need to be careful of is, if you have existing deficiencies in your system, you can't use the impact fee to catch up. So if you already have streets that are at capacity today, you can't use the impact fee to widen that street, because growth isn't causing that, it's already at capacity. So you have to solve the deficiencies with other revenue streams. So I think we covered all of this. Some of the things that we've done as far as trying to look at costing, we don't necessarily always put the full cost of a project in the impact fee, because we're looking at what is the likely split of the cost for building the project. If you anticipate that you're gonna see some grant dollars in that, we typically try to back that out, so that, again, the growth is just paying for the portion of it that we anticipate that we will see in, that growth would create. So again, we've covered this. These are the categories we're looking at: Parks and Rec, police, transportation in both streets and multimodal. Those are the ones that we looked at and what they're based on. All of these are citywide impact fees currently. When we next look at impact fees, we may want to go to a district model where you don't have citywide fees for all of these things. It might be based quadrant by quadrant in the city. That might change how some of this applies, but we don't have that at this point. You see in the fee component what is supported, what we're looking at paying for with the impact fees, and how it's allocated. For parks, it's based on population. For police, it's based on population as a combination with vehicle trips, how many trips are being generated. Transportation is all based on vehicle trips, and then the multimodal is, again, a combination of population and trips. So here's the history, how we got here. I'm gonna skip right through that, and here's the punchline for you. In green is the proposed total cost for the new impact fee. In gray right next to it is the current fee. The last column shows you the increase in each of those. And these are quite significant, as we talked about in the workshop. These are fairly healthy changes. For instance, with just using the residential development for multifamily, a fee would go from currently at $5,200 per unit to almost $9,000. Single family goes from $7,500 to roughly $13,000. So these are relatively significant increases. I'm not going to read through all of the list, but you can see on the list there's some pretty healthy changes here, and this, again, based largely on the cost to construct and the cost to buy real estate to meet the CIP. This is John's growth projections. He's been spot on. I tell him this all the time. He's some kind of wizard, because his projections of annual growth rate is like off maybe one person over 10 years. So he does a good job. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to the individual departments to speak about their fees.
Mayor, Council, Greg McLean, Chief of Police. Like Mr. Wilson said in the workshop, you're going to hear repeat basically what I was talking about before. But basically our fees didn't change, our projects didn't change. What is changing is the cost and the challenge of the population increase. We had a study that was done on all of the city facilities, but and the police department was categorized out as being at a point where, based off of the population increase, that we're going to need to expand the police department. Back in 2003, when we first built the police department, it was a 24,000 square foot facility, and it cost us roughly about $3.4 million to build the police department, the shop, and the land. So when we start looking at what are we going to need for the future growth, we're about 26% increase in calls for service since 2008, since 18 to current right now. They were estimating, the company that we had come in estimating, we would probably need roughly about a 15,000 square foot facility to give us more office space for the more officers that we need to hire to cover the increase in population. To do that was going to cost us $12.6 million compared to what we were doing before. So you're looking at roughly back in 2003, $1.89 a square foot, and now we're looking at about $840 a square foot for the expansion. We need to expand on our evidence because we have more crime. We have more need to store this evidence, so we need to expand our evidence. Back in 2003, they were pretty much spot on when they decided that somewhere around in this time period, we would probably be looking at having to expand. Going along with that expansion, we have parking needs. We do use our facility for training, and we're constantly out of parking spots when we do have those trainings. To do that, we had to look at doing some land purchase, which we were in negotiation with the people that own the land just to the west of us, so that is moving forward. So for us to complete the project that we need, the 15,000 square foot facility for expansion plus expanding our evidence, it would take us, currently right now we're collecting around 450,000 annually. It would take us 26 years for me to be able to complete that project. So the only other way that we do that is to increase the impact fees or come up with a different way of funding that to build that 15,000 square foot facility. I'm open for questions.
Any questions, Chief? Seeing none. Thanks, Chief.
Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me this time. I seem to always follow the police chief, and that's a
Better
tough
than
act
having
to
him follow
follow.
you.
Pardon?
It's better than having him follow you
Well, that I'm used to.
with the lights on.
So, Park and Rec impact fees, we're kind of the odd duck in that sense, where we are a replacement methodology versus a project base. Our fees do support our level 1, which is that active, highly developed space. Level 2 is more of the open space or the trail systems, and sometimes it's future level 1s, but it's out far enough that be just considered open space at this point. And we do have a small amount for indoor recreation, which in the past we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, and we were able to build the Black Bay Depot. Future Park and Rec Commission hopes to be able to partner with the schools when they build one of their schools and make the gym maybe twice as big, so do a double gym. Yeah. Gotta go backspace. With this particular one, really what we're looking at is our land costs. I think as Warren mentioned, that land costs have gone up. We're not looking to address we did not go in and look at the construction costs. We know those are going up, but we've been able to go after grants, partner with Avista as an example. But the land is where we're struggling right now. There's very little land out there available. So with this update, that's the only thing we're addressing. To give you an idea of where that's at, currently we're collecting $65,000 an acre for both level 1 and level 2 parkland. The change in that would be going level 1 at $147,000 an acre. That actually might be 146, but, and then 80, I think it's 81,000 an acre. So yes, level 2 has increased quite a bit. To get there, we looked at the MLS database. We looked at 78 properties. We reviewed that. We looked at recent city purchases. We had to determine whether they were level 1, level 2, if they'd fit in. Were they open to the public? There was a few spots when you got to the level 2 across the river that were gated communities, obviously not public access. I just went out just before this because I wanted to see where things were at. I found 2 properties that were available. Though both of those were pending. One was on Bodine, and it was connected to, you could buy the house, and then this was the vacant land next to it. That one came out at $81,000 an acre. I don't know where it started at. I could not find that out. The other one was 40 acres on Prairie that's also pending, and that was $146,000 an acre. The rest of the stuff that I can find available right now is your half acre to an acre and a half. That's within kind of the city limits and just outside of it. When you get up to looking at houses or properties with acreage with the house on it, our costs go way up. I understand that it's a big jump to go from 65,000 an acre to 140, I'm gonna look it up this time, 147,000 an acre. But it's the market. Has it come down at all for vacant land? Not enough that I can see. And we're struggling on that end. I can't go after grants on land because grants are now taking us anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years to get those through with the state, and those are federal pass-throughs, so they become difficult. So we're just trying to maintain what we have. So I'm open for any questions.
Questions to Dave? See none. Thank you.
One
Go
real
ahead,
quick,
Joe.
just for clarification for anybody who's maybe watching or reading the minutes, say maintain what we have, what you mean is amount of acreage per 1,000 residents, right? Yeah.
Bill? I'm not sure who's doing what on this one.
I believe.
Mayor and council, as you're aware, we've adopted our impact fees based on a capital improvement plan from our transportation master plan. It's typically the projection of needs for the community to handle growth, divided by the number of projected trips that will come about through that. So that's where our transportation master plan manages that. We've historically have adjusted impact fees by the engineering news record. That the engineering news record construction cost index for over 100 years has been collecting data across the United States, and so that they could track and make adjustments with that. And so they've always, that's what we've done every year, is adjust by what has kind of happened nationally using the National Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. We have found it just was not keeping up with the costs that we had. So we contracted with JUB to go through and look at our capital improvement plan within our transportation master plan and review those costs and dig in a little bit deeper than the previous consultant did when they developed our transportation plan. JUB looked at historical data from ITD projects. They looked at what was going on with market volatility. They looked at what they saw with unit prices, everything from curb to sidewalk to asphalt. They looked at the size of the projects and whether we thought that we were going to be pursuing grants for for a large federal project, and the grants add more cost to them, or whether they were a local project in which we could manage more locally. They also looked at the project size. You get a large project, you have a lot of tons of asphalt, you get a better bid price. And so they made adjustment on all of those projects based on project size as well. Our right-of-way costs that they put into the CIP update are not as great as we had seen within some of the park land, or maybe some of the land for parking the PD has, but we're acquiring smaller strips, maybe a 20-foot strip along adjacent roadway or something like that. So we're not acquiring huge, vast tracts of land to expand the roadway systems. So as I indicated before, impact fees, they're based on the city's transportation master plan. They're system-based improvements. A series of roundabouts, traffic signals, and various things. There's quite a few projects on that list. It's over a 20-year projected growth horizon. And over that 20 years, they've projected what the number of trips would be as well. So they've gone in and modeled the system, said over 20 years, this is the growth you're going to have in the community, this is the increase in trips, this is the cost of what it's going to be to expand the system. So they come up with a cost per trip basis. There were some assumptions made that we were going to get grants or other funding for that, so you could see the costs. We didn't take the total cost. We know that we're going to pursue grants and get a few of those as well. So that is the transportation element portion. A few years ago, we established a multimodal portion of our impact fees. That multimodal is multi-use trails and bike facilities from our transportation master plan. Centennial Trail, bike lanes, multi-use trails throughout the community. What the consultant, our previous consultant for impact fees did is they went through and figured out, okay, what would it cost to replace all of that multimodal facility that we currently have? And so then they said, okay, over the next 10 years of growth, what would it cost to replace the replacement? They established a replacement-based criteria on a square foot or linear foot of trail per population. So as the population grew, they knew that we would need to expand our system just to maintain the same multimodal facility within there. Those were applied on a per-person basis for residential and a per-trip basis for the commercial and industrial facilities. So those are the transportation multimodal pieces of the impact fee adjustments. Any questions?
Questions, Bill?
Thank you.
None.
Thanks.
So I will move on to the next slide. I don't know that there is much more for me to say. Here is a breakdown of the cost comparisons for the original cost, the engineering news record adjusted cost, and then our proposed cost and the variances so you can see where those shake out at. Again, here's a slide with what we have currently in place, as well as what the proposal would take the impact fees to. And I think I'll leave that up for our discussion purposes. I'm going to move back over here and so that way if you have questions for any of the staff members, they can come up here
Perfect.
and I can speak to you from over there.
Thank you. Shannon, anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
With that, I'll close the public
Do you
hearing.
want that, or do you want the recommended action up?
I wasn't sure what questions we'd have, so
Okay.
we can have somebody pull that up
Okay.
if we want to have it. So you have some options tonight. You can adopt the proposals as presented and direct us to bring that back to you. You can reject it across the board and say, don't do any of it. You can take an approach of saying, we're going to do a percentage of what the recommended increase is. You can do something else and ask us to explore this and bring back to you additional options if you want. The one thing to keep in mind, again, the comment about if we have deficiencies, if we don't fully fund it, we have to, in the future, find a different way to fund it that's not from impact fees. And that typically means it's coming from grants or tax dollars of some sort. So with that, I think we can answer.
I'm going to add one more piece, because I added a final slide in there that talked about the deficiency and what the amount would be if we didn't implement, and we talked about implementing like at 50% and what those numbers would be. And so did everybody look at the final slide and what those amounts were? If you did, then I'm good, but if you haven't, then we can go over those numbers. Okay. So everyone has seen this slide, basically. And then Bill had reiterated to me that a master transportation plan would take 2 years to complete that update and then get through the study to update for it. So you're looking at, if we did zero at the master transportation plan, we'd have a deficiency of about 3.4 million on that one. That one will take longer than the other two to do an updated study, so.
Couple questions. So these are based on costs, right? Current costs?
Yes, essentially.
So we go through COVID, we have supply chain issues, we have people, labor, workforce issues, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna, but let's suppose things change over the next couple of years and we see our costs come down. Do we revisit this with potential to lower them? Or do we have to wait until it's next, couple of years before we bring this back?
So practically speaking, it will take a period of time to come back to you. I think our hope is, as we move forward, is to break each of the categories out and pursue them separately, because some of them we can turn faster than others. Shelley just indicated transportation is the one that's the longest lead, because you have to do a whole new capital or a plan for your transportation master plan, identify where your deficiencies are going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and then cost those out, and that takes time. The others we can turn around relatively quickly, and so I think our thought is to start running them as individual categories rather than as one great big packet. So some of this we could have back probably in a year, year and a half. Others it's going to take significantly longer.
And if we go back to, you talked about the master plans for transportation, et cetera, but if we want to do a new impact fee study, isn't that a couple-year process as well?
Right, so you could complete your master transportation plan, and then we'd have the beginnings of the, the impact fee study done, and then you would complete the section on the master transportation plan. In the meantime, if we had decided to go with districting or some of those other changes, those decisions could be made ahead of that.
Okay.
And so there is a little bit of crossover, but you are looking at probably a minimum of 2 years before you could have a new transportation piece.
Well, I do like the districting. I think that makes sense, especially if you get down in this area where you've got, not a big impact on the infrastructure. And I don't like the overall cost. I'm not saying they're not justified, but that's my concern, the huge increases. But with that, I'll be quiet. And Carrie, I think you had a comment or a question.
Just a quick clarification. So if impact fees, the way they are this minute in time, in a year, that's the deficiency.
Yes,
In a year and a half, in 2 years,
yes.
if were exactly as they are.
And so if you did 50% of what the recommended amount is, then it would be
Right,
50%
half
of
of that
that
for the
amount. So we
deficiency.
tried to make it real simple for you to look at. And I think the planning and zoning had recommended parks and public safety being adopted at the full amount, and there was some amount that was different on the transportation amount.
There's a lot of discussion on that in the minutes. How about other comments? Kenny, let's start now with you. What are your thoughts?
I obviously don't like the increase, but if it has to come from somewhere, I'd rather it come from the growth than the taxpayers.
So you're okay with them as presented?
I would love to see us find some other way, but I don't know there is some other way. So if this is what we need to do and staff recommends it as the best, I don't like it, but I think it may be the best option to go with.
Okay, Lynn?
I don't like the size of the increase. I think there's a definite need for an increase of some sort. I don't have a number to throw out there for you on what I think that percentage might be, but I do think we need to do some kind of an increase. If we don't do it here, probably our only other option is to increase taxes down the road. So again, growth pays for growth to a certain extent. It won't pay for 100% of it, but every bit would help. So
Nathan?
Yeah, I'm in agreement, of course, with it's a huge increase. Most of those categories we're looking at least double, what the impact fee is now. And part of the concern I have about that is how much, in a way, it really discourages new growth. And so you can end up with zero, theoretically, if it just squashes the idea that we're going to come and develop here. So I think there's a risk there with this large of an increase. I would like to see or advocate for, maybe a incremental increase over time, maybe the next 3 or 4 years. Do maybe like a 50%, like we talked about, to reduce that deficiency. 50% now in a year, another 25%, and then another 25% in the third year to get up to what we're recommending. It's a tough one. I think everybody, from a household budget standpoint, we're all kind of faced with this too. What can I buy and what can I afford with the income that I have now when all the costs around me are going up? And so unfortunately, that's what we're all faced. And, but that would be my idea is to have an incremental increase so it's not all in one big shot.
Carrie, let's go down to you.
Well, I mentioned in the workshop, the challenge for me is not every person who rents an apartment or buys a home has just arrived here from somewhere else. You have people that live here, kids grew up, they went their own apartment. This is going to be passed on. You're going to see an increase. The developers, the builders, will pass their costs along, which the costs are so high now anyways. So I think one of the unintended consequences, kind of like you were talking about, we can call this impact fees or we can call it a moratorium, but it's going to have an impact on rent, which is already really high. and the cost of buying a home. And like I say, not every single person that does one of those things has just arrived here with a U-Haul from another state. And so, yeah, it's a huge jump. And the exclamation point notwithstanding, on one of those earlier slides, it says growth paying for itself. Certainly needs to chip on in there, but this is a big hit. And I wish I had a solution, but.
Okay. Josh?
I'm in agreement with everybody. It's a huge, huge jump, and I don't like the numbers, but I don't see where we're gonna get it from anywhere else. And I agree with Nathan as far as I'd like to see it incremental and to kind of offset those deficiencies through the next few years. But again, like Carrie said, you're gonna see that pass through to everybody on the downhill side of that, so.
Okay. Joe?
So this one's tough. I was actually hoping there would be some public comment to get some kind of input of where the community was at with this. You know, we are unfortunately at the local level, just like everybody else, we're the victims, I think, of some really horrible fiscal mismanagement at the federal level. It's led to all kinds of inflation. I mean, the costs are what the costs are. So to get some of the costs down, I kind of looked at the categories. Okay, what's absolutely necessary for a city to function? If you can't maintain law and order, a city can't function. So I don't see cutting anything out of the increase in the public safety impact fees. Without functioning transportation infrastructure, a city can't function. You can't get goods and services in and out, people in and out. So I think it would be unwise, given what costs are, to, again, cut the increase out of transportation. And listening to what people talk about, what they're most concerned about, all the time I hear about traffic and the road conditions and everything else. All the time people are concerned about crime, and crime's going up. How are we going to deal with that? How do we stay safe? It's not very often that I hear somebody say, man, we just need more bike paths. Or you know, I just wish we had more parks. I mean, I hear it occasionally, but not nearly as often. Now, multimodal and parks, Dave's going to hate me for saying this, but you know, those aren't necessary for a city to function. It makes it a nicer place to live. But if we're going to bet on the possibility that prices might stabilize or come down, and the risk is, other people have said, is that if these fees get too high, then either, no matter what, housing cost is going to go up, because either the stuff's going to get built and that cost is going to get passed on to the final user, or the developer is going to decide there's not enough profit in it with all these fees, they're not going to build it at all. So if you have smaller supply, guess what? Prices go up. And that's another huge, huge, huge problem in not just our city, but this entire area. That prices are completely out of control. I've said it several times before, but if I was to try to buy my house now, and I bought it in 2014, if I was trying to buy it now, 8 years later, I couldn't afford it at all. So that's a huge concern of mine too. So I think rather than a phased approach for all of it, we gotta have the officers on the street. We gotta have streets that function. I would rather have a proposal come back that would somehow take 25% of the increase out of parks and multimodal. So if we can't buy, if we end up having fewer acres per 1,000 people at parks, yeah, that's a bummer, but that's probably okay. Multimodal, there's, you know, most people drive, not as many people ride their bikes. So it'll have any shortcomings in the multimodal will have an impact on a smaller number of people than shortcomings in transportation or public safety would. So I would propose something like that.
Let me ask you a question. I believe Nathan said a stair-step approach, you know, 25%, 50%, whatever, 25, 25. You're talking about keeping public safety and transportation at the proposed level and then reducing parks and multimodal, and you mentioned 25%. Would that be the intention to bring that, to increase it up in another year or so, or wait until another study is done?
Well, another study's gonna be done in a couple of years, so, you know, if we wanted to increase it in a year, I guess we could take a look at it, but we're not too far off of another study anyway. So, and the good news is we get closer to what current costs are for parks and multimodal, but we don't kick development so hard in the face that it just doesn't happen.
Okay.
And effectively speaking, I think we're talking about very similar things, because if you were to take the full amount of transportation and public safety, and just as an example, kept the current rate of parks and multimodal, that would basically be a 50% increase.
Yeah, I don't think we can afford to keep the current rate of Parks and Multimodal.
No, but
because-
you see
but
what
right.
I'm
No,
saying.
I see what
You
you're
know,
saying.
there's a lot of different ways to increment it,
Right.
depending on how much we reduce in each one or fully fund.
How about other comments? Anything further, or someone want to float a motion?
If I can get back to the top of my, I would move to approve, the public safety and transportation increases at the proposed level, and the parks and multimodal increases at 75% of the proposed increase.
Does that work for you, Mr. Wilson?
So the only thing I'd add to that is and direct staff to prepare the documents for final
And
approval.
direct staff to prepare the documents to come back before council at a future meeting.
I'd second that.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, Shannon, please take the roll.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you all. And staff, thanks for the work you put in on this. I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's huge, especially for your departments. It's a ton of research. And, you know, we had the workshop and asked you to bring back additional information, which you did. You know, we all wish we could just say, absolutely, we're gonna go the full bore on all of it. But by the same token, you know, we're cognizant of what some of those impacts may be on the other side of it. If we understand we need it, or should have it as we continue to grow, but if we take all of it right now, that we may not have that growth, and which may not be a bad thing. It depends on what side of the fence you are on that. But it's just such a huge increase that I think this might be a pretty good hybrid method to get to where we need to be. So again, thanks for your comments on that. Unfinished business returning ordinances. We have 4 ordinances tonight. The first is the Morris Annexation.
I move to place the ordinance Morris Annexation File Number ANNX-0013-2021 on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Wilson.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, annexing property consisting of approximately 13.09 acres. It's that portion of the southeast quarter of Section 24, Township 51 North, Range 5 West, Boise Meridian, Kootenai County, Idaho, providing for amendment of the official zoning map and providing for an effective date hereof.
I move to approve the ordinance Morris Annexation File Number ANNX-0013-2021 and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion. Roll call.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Motion passes. Next ordinance is the Adams Annexation.
I move to place the ordinance Adams Annexation File Number ANNX-22-12 on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Thorson? Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Motion passes. Mr. Wilson.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of state of Idaho, annexing property consisting of approximately 4.75 acres, being the west half of Tract 39, Block 35, Post Falls irrigated tracts, according to the plat recorded in Book C of Plats at pages 78 through 80, records of Kootenai County, Idaho, providing for amendment of the official zoning map and providing for an effective date hereof.
I move to approve the ordinance Adams Annexation File Number ANNX-22-12 and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item up tonight is the Joseph Family Trust Annexation.
I move to place the ordinance Joseph Family Trust Annexation, file number ANNX-22-7, on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second?
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Motion passes.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation in the state of Idaho, annexing property consisting of approximately 41 acres, a parcel of land being a portion of the southeast quarter of Section 23 and a portion of the southwest quarter of Section 24, Township 51 North, Range 5 West, Boise Meridian, Kootenai County, Idaho, providing for an amendment of the official zoning map, providing for an effective date hereof.
I move to approve the ordinance Joseph Family Trust Annexation, file number ANNX-22-7, and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second?
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And I'll correct myself. I said we had 4 ordinances. We only have 3. That was the last one. And the fourth item under action items is the contract amendment with JUB Engineers for construction of the Outfall Phase 1.
I move to approve.
Whoop.
Oh, hi. I was so excited. I just wanted to move to approve.
Well, you can.
You're so awesome. Yes.
I thought for a minute I missed it. I did that before, I jumped the gun.
No, you did great.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager, Public Works. So my action item this evening is a contract amendment, or agreement amendment with JUB for the completion of the outfall. So the good news is the outfall line is completed. We are using it, flowing all of our effluent through the pipe. This amendment this evening is an additional cost addressing the additional time needed to complete the project as a result of the time impacts and the challenges of the project. So I have a few slides tonight. I'll try to make this brief and hit the highlights, and then be happy to answer any questions at the end. So a quick background, last September, I presented a change order with McMillan, the general contractor that's contracted with the city for this work. The summary of that change order was a CIPP cured in place product as a solution to address the concerns the city and the city's design consultant had in not being able to meet a passing pressure test. So there's a section of line that was not holding air or passing the pressure test for the specified time. This was the proposed solution by the contractor. It also included specific timeframes and addressed the liquidated damages under the contract. So council approved that change order. Unfortunately, the installation of the CIPP was unsuccessful. This occurred last fall. Following that, thereafter, the contractor elected just to replace the entire section of pipe with brand new pipe. So that work started early January. They came out on site and completed that. By the end of January, following the completion of the new pipe, passed the pressure test, and the contractor met their substantial completion on February 2nd. So what that means is that it's beneficial use to the city. We were able to commission it and put our effluent through the line. So that was a significant milestone for us. This is a profile view. You probably recognize this from my presentation in September. That yellow section is a section of line that was in question on the hillside. This is an actual photo taken towards the end of this work, late January. So what you see here is the final installation of the anchor blocks for the pipe, and then the next step would be backfilling and restoring that hillside. So showing some of the actual work and challenges in the field. So this brings me back to the additional time that JUB spent bringing this to completion. So tonight's request is an amendment to JUB's contract, adding $10,000. That accounts for the additional observation time, and then the additional construction engineering and management estimated to get to the finish. So this is not to exceed. Anything that is less than that $10,000 would come back to the city. I put the highlights of where we've been. So the original contract actually dates back to 2018 when we started the CMGC delivery method with McMillan and the design contract. And then these items are more or less items that the council has been aware of and approved ultimately. So the total amount there at the bottom is the revised contract amount. So next steps, as I mentioned, we've reached substantial completion. We're working on site restoration items. There's a few things we need to address, and then final project items with JUB. So final survey, record drawings, and project closeout. On the construction side, contract with McMillan. So we are in discussions and closing the contract out with McMillan. As I mentioned, the change order in September, change order 4, specified completion by a certain date. It also accounted for some amount of what would have been liquidated damages. We are taking into consideration the change order 4 and then all of the work and activities that occurred after change order 4. So in these discussions with McMillan, I anticipate we will have an update to council in the near future. And that would also account for the additional time that JUB has spent on the project. So with that, that is my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't know about anyone else, Andrew, but $10,000 change for the wastewater plant almost seems like a freebie. When we look at what the overall cost of this project has been, I know you folks have done a very good job in managing it, but the costs have just been astronomical because of all the issues we've had. So, $10,000 is $10,000, but compared to what we've seen in the past, that's not a shocker. As a matter of fact, it probably a shocker to me that it's so low. So, thank you very much. Council, any comments?
Gotta do it.
Entertain a motion.
No, I was gonna say, I am so ready to make a motion to approve the contract amendment with JUB Engineers for construction of the Outfall Phase 1.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Walker,
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Tonight, we have no new business, followed by citizens' issues, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding a city-related issue that is not on the agenda. Seeing none. Administrative staff reports. We do have one tonight. Prairie Avenue. Mr. Paulus.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. Recently, staff has received several inquiries about what is going on with development along Prairie Avenue, and in particular in the vicinity of State Highway 41. We're also aware that some of the council members have also received some email inquiries, what's going on in that area, and in particular, why is the city looking at roundabouts on Prairie Avenue. Tonight I want to go over a little bit of the history as to how we got to where we are today with development along Prairie Avenue as a whole, what we're looking at as projects which are in development and forthcoming, and how they handle current and long-term transportation needs, both from a efficiency standpoint in moving traffic and a safety standpoint. So Prairie Avenue is a 6-mile stretch now through the city of Post Falls, or predominantly so. Those little areas that are slightly highlighted red account for about 1.5 miles of land which is either not fully in the city of Post Falls or does not abut an existing city boundary at all. Over the last 15 years, the city of Post Falls has really grown up and started to take over and become part of Prairie Avenue. Over the years, traffic east of Highway 41 has remained fairly consistent, around 5,000, as you get close to Highway 41, increasing up to about 8,000 in 2021. By 2035, we anticipate that section between Pleasant View Road and Highway 41 to increase up to about 19,000 vehicle trips per day. That's an important number to remember because that affects the operations of some of the traffic control devices we utilize. When we look east of Highway 41, that traffic volume has been going up consistently from 2010. In 2021, we were around 14,000 vehicles per day. By 2035, we'll be at around 22,000 vehicles per day. If we go back in time just a little bit, in 2010, all of the intersections were stop controlled as you came onto Prairie Avenue, with the exception of Highway 41 where we had a traffic signal, and there was a fairly new traffic signal at Meyer Road in the Post Falls Highway District, where the road was making that transition between the 5-lane section that goes into Coeur d'Alene and the 2-lane section we've had in Post Falls. Shortly after that time, things started to change. Post Falls Highway District got a number of grants to do safety improvements along Prairie Avenue. They first put in a roundabout at McGuire Road, then they put in another one at Chase Road, then they put in one at at Pleasant View Road in Prairie. Then in 2021, they put in a traffic signal at Greens Ferry Road and Prairie Avenue. That was also a safety improvement. Then last year, they put into operation a roundabout at Prairie in Idaho. And then the city of Post Falls got involved and we put our first roundabout in at Prairie and Spokane Street. It's substantially completed, but not completed yet. Now, why is this important? Looking at this area, one thing I'd like to point out is the Post Falls Highway District put in a number of roundabouts and other traffic control devices for safety improvements. They were grant funded, so that limited what they could do. They had to address the safety issues, but they could not address capacity issues. So when we look at the roundabouts at Pleasant View, McGuire, and Chase Road, Pleasant View Road is now our roundabout because of annexations. We will be gaining McGuire and Chase as we develop into those areas. Our traffic modeling projects that by 2035, the volumes at those roundabouts will either be at or exceed the capacity for a single lane roundabout. That means by 2035, we'll need to have identified, do we replace it with a larger multi-lane roundabout, or do we go in there and put in a traffic signal? Roundabout, traffic signal, there are tools in our basket as to how to best manage traffic, and we should look at each intersection individually to see what is the best solution. We put in a multi-lane roundabout just recently, mostly completed. Before we put that roundabout in, we did a study. We took a look. What's the best solution for that area? Is it a roundabout or is it a traffic signal? Our studies came back and said a roundabout performed a little bit better than a traffic signal. We also saw that our transportation master plan at the time was initially identifying a single lane roundabout. But our traffic study showed that within 10 years, or by the year 2030, that roundabout would need to be widened in order to continue operating efficiently. So we put in a multi-lane roundabout, and now that's anticipated to handle traffic to the year 2040 and beyond. Post Falls Highway District put in the single lane roundabout at Idaho and Prairie last year. That also is anticipated to meet or exceed volumes for capacity at that intersection by 2035. At this location, because of the tightness of the rights-of-way out there, some of the geographical features with the hillsides, and the very close proximity to the railroad right-of-way, we anticipate that that's one location that will most likely, when it comes to widening it, will need to go to a traffic signal. The traffic signal that's put in recently at Greens Ferry and Prairie Avenue, it was put in to handle the improvements that they put in, which was left turn lanes and then just a single through lane. When we widen out Prairie Avenue prior to 2035, that traffic signal will have to be removed completely and reconstructed because it is not big enough to handle a 5-lane roadway at present design. We do anticipate by the year 2028, and this is based upon a traffic study that's being done right now, that a multi-lane roundabout will need to go in just immediately west of State Highway 41 at Charleville Road. And currently, we have 2 roundabouts under design and estimating construction this year and next year at Zoros, which is a 1/4 mile east of Highway 41, and Fennicus, which is a 1/2 mile east of Highway 41. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in that 41 area because that's the area that a lot of people are asking questions right now. So in the Highway 41 area, we right now have a traffic study that's going on for the Tech Park in the northwest corner. That traffic study shows that in order for that tech park to work successfully, that Charleville Road and Prairie Avenue will need to have a single-lane roundabout. That study also took a look and identified that within the build-out area, build-out year, which was 2042, stop control should work adequately for Cecil Road. That means traffic on Cecil Road would be stopped, traffic on Prairie Avenue would continue east-west freely through there. A lot of that is due to the close proximity of the Union Pacific Main Line, just a little bit more than a mile to the north, where we don't have any methodology to get the road across the railroad in the future. On the east side of State Highway 41, we've identified 2 roundabouts. A traffic study was done in 2019 and then updated in 2021 by the Prairie Shopping Center, which is in the northeast corner, and it identified that a multi-lane roundabout was needed for Zoros and Prairie. In the study, we had them take a look at which is going to operate better, a traffic signal or a roundabout. The traffic study came back and showed that both could operate successfully and meet the city's minimum requirements for operations. But it also showed that a roundabout had significantly less delays to the general traffic, and that also that roundabouts perform better. One thing to take into consideration is that Prairie Avenue is identified as a critical arterial corridor by the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization. With that, the goal is to try to limit signalized or controlled intersections such as roundabouts to no closer than a half-mile apart. This violates that. But there's a reason behind that. We actually have 2 conflicting studies going on, or 2 corridor studies. Along Highway 41, there's the Highway 41 Corridor Master Plan, which tries to preserve capacity on Highway 41 and the movement of traffic by establishing a quarter-mile and half-mile backage road. That would be Zoros and Fennekiss on the east, Charleville Road and Cecil Road on the west. In order to encourage traffic to utilize that backage road system and preserve capacity on Highway 41, the Highway 41 Corridor Master Plan and the City of Post Falls Transportation Master Plans identified traffic signals, but could also be roundabouts at those quarter-mile and half-mile locations on Prairie Avenue. One of the weaknesses, if we were to look at traffic signals at Zoros and Fennekiss, is that at a quarter-mile spacing, traffic signals do not work quite as well for coordination to get traffic to move freely without I just start to get up to speed and now I have to stop for a traffic light. Start to get up to speed, stop for a traffic light. A roundabout allows traffic to move a little bit more smoothly, not quite as fast on the free flow, but you're able to keep up a speed of around 35 miles per hour and then slow down around to that 22 mile per hour range for the roundabouts. And you get rid of having to stop and wait at a traffic light. The City of Post Falls is currently working with the Post Falls Highway District on a grant project to widen Prairie Avenue between State Highway 41 and Meyer Road. It's in the early stages of design, and the City of Post Falls is working with Post Falls Highway District. And with both of these roundabouts that are under design, we have already discussed with them what the general scope of those roundabouts look like, and we will be sharing with them the designs as they proceed forward so that they can incorporate them into the final design of Prairie Avenue. As of right now, the funds from the state to widen Prairie Avenue have been obligated for design, but we do not have a date yet for construction. Our earliest estimate would be 2028, but once a design is done, which is expected late this year, both Post Falls Highway District and we would be supporting them in that. We'll be advocating to get construction dollars as soon as possible. That section between Highway 41 and Meyer Road is important for the safe movement of operations to have a 5-lane roadway. It is a primary truck route for us, and it is a federal truck route from Highway 41 east to Atlas Road, which is a 3-mile section, and that was recently changed at the request of Post Falls Highway District. Conceptually, this is not the easiest to see and understand, but basically this is a rough layout of what the Zoros and Fennicus roundabouts would look like, a 5-lane road for Prairie running left and right across your screen, and the side road having 2 lanes coming into the roundabout, whether you're on the north side or south side. And then as you exit Prairie Avenue onto the side roads, there'd be a single lane getting off. In essence, we're going to end up with something similar to this. This is the Pole Line and Cecil Road roundabout, which was our first multi-lane roundabout to come into the city. Just for a rough idea on the effectiveness of this, the Pole Line and Cecil roundabout's been in operation for about 6 months. It handles a lot of traffic when kids are going to school and getting off at the end of the day along with buses. One of the big concerns at that location was safety. And historically, utilizing 2021 data, there were 9 collisions at Pole Line and Cecil before the roundabout went in. In the 6 months that we've had this roundabout in operation, there have been 0 collisions. It's a little bit anecdotal. It's too early to have a strong statistical analysis as to how effective it is, but it's looking really good that if we just took a straight look at it, we should say, well, there should have been at least 3 to 5 collisions at that intersection in the last 6 months. We've had 0. So why do we look at roundabouts in the city of Post Falls, and how do they generally operate compared to other traffic control devices, stop signs, and traffic signals? Roundabouts have, in a single lane capacity, 18 to 20,000 vehicles per day. If you'll remember earlier, I told you 19,000 vehicles per day was what we were anticipating on a lot of those roundabouts west of Highway 41. When a single lane roundabout gets above 18,000 vehicles per day, they generally start to get a little bit skittish or a little bit upset as to how they operate. And there's a lot of dynamics as to how much traffic is coming in off the side streets versus the main streets, as to how well they really operate. It starts to become like a traffic signal when you have to sit through 1 or 2 red lights before you get through the intersection. It may not be the best place for it to operate. For us, that means when we get to around 19,000, we need to start taking a look at, do we need to replace that roundabout, or is there something else we can do to continue making it work and not fail and incur all that additional cost? A multi-lane roundabout can handle 35 to 40,000 vehicles per day. They start getting a little bit skittish around that 35,000 vehicles per day. We're looking at 19,000 west of Highway 41, 22,000 east of Highway 41. Well within the operating standards of a multi-lane roundabout. The biggest impact of roundabouts is safety. When you take a look at all types of roundabouts, compared to stop control or traffic signals, roundabouts have 90% fewer fatalities. There's a 72 to 85% reduction in injury collisions. Those are the 2 really big areas. When you look at all collisions, there's a 35 to 62% reduction in all collisions. The biggest reason you have less injuries is a lot of those collisions start to become glancing collisions where it's like a nose-to-nose glance off the front. You don't have head-on collisions and you don't have T-bones. Also, roundabouts tend to have a 40% reduction in pedestrian collisions. One point to note is that multi-lane roundabouts tend to be on the lower end of that spectrum as far as the reductions in injury and collision and overall collisions, but other studies have shown that after the first 1 to 2 years of operation, those multi-lane roundabouts usually recover about 10 to 20% of their effectiveness in improved safety. In terms of traffic flow versus stop signs, roundabouts have 13 to 23% reduced vehicle delay and 14 to 37% reduced stops. That means you can come up. If there's no one around, you can continue through. You don't have to stop unnecessarily. And similarly for traffic signals, you see an 89% reduction in overall vehicle delay and a 56% reduction in unnecessary stops. And then there's additional benefits from air quality, where you see a number of areas where, because you're not stopping as often, you have less carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide production and better fuel efficiency for the general public as a whole. I open myself up to any questions that you may have as to what we have going on.
Good information, Rob. Appreciate it. Any questions for Rob?
Very thorough, thank you.
Very good.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Mayor and council comments. I don't know what it's doing outside if the snow's still coming down, but please drive careful because regardless of how good a job our street departments do, the roads can be slick, especially with cold weather coming in, so please be careful. And I just throw this out there. If someone could ever explain to me why I can drive down the street in the morning when it's 8 degrees outside and I see kids standing waiting for the bus in shorts and short sleeve shirts. I just don't get it. So if someone's more knowledgeable than me, I would love an explanation someday because I just don't get it. That's what I say, no coat, short sleeves and shorts. So anyway, that's just me. Council comments.
I have trivia about kids being dressed inappropriately for Arctic Express, 0 degrees. In some states, including North Dakota, if a child is not have the right apparel, they cannot get on a bus. A bus driver will not let them on a bus if they don't have a coat, hat, mittens, snow pants. The cold weather can be a matter of life or death. It just doesn't stay around as long enough for us for the kids to get frostbite and then learn that wearing flip-flops at 0 degrees
The only
is not a
problem
good
is they
thing.
don't let them on the bus, they stay out in the cold.
Stay out in the freeze, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Anybody else? We do not need an executive session tonight. The next motion is?
Adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.